you have to have a strong brand. And really, for long-term success, you have to be building a brand that both on and off Amazon in order to be successful over the long term.
Welcome everyone to the Dev Device Podcast. Today I have Jon Stojan with me. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us. You are a fellow marketing person. You are running First North Marketing. You're the CEO of this company. And I saw you doing some quite amazing thing with this company. Tell us more about First North Marketing.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the founder of First North Marketing, and we help brands and sellers everywhere from launch to seven figures, engineer profitable growth. Our focus is really the Amazon Seller Central in US and the Canadian markets, where we're developing and implementing customized strategies for them. And for our agency, we're not trying to be the biggest. Instead, our focus is more on long-term win-win relationships with sellers and brands. Which is why, one of the things I'm really proud of is that we have an 85% client retention rate. And we do that through things, for example, like, we don't require long-term contracts. And we try to work in a way that makes sure that it's better for clients. And we do other things really so that way it's great for clients, but also more fun for me and the team, because that's a big part of it too. Because if one of our key principles is if we're not having fun, we're not doing it right.
There you go. If you're not having fun, we're not doing it right. Yeah, that's one of the notes to take. Yeah, cool. A quick note from our sponsor. AMZ Scout is a complete tool set to help you start and grow your Amazon business. To find profitable, low competition products, learn how to sell with private label, arbitrage, dropshipping, and wholesale, and also discover popular product keywords and verified suppliers. Please check out the link in the description.
So, we've been around for a little over 3 years now. We started during the pandemic, and I'll talk a little bit about that in my entrepreneurial journey. But kind of the short version up front, to give you a little bit of a teaser, is that I started out as a seller myself, and had a lot of friends that were entrepreneurs that had food brands and were selling wholesale and wanted to figure out this Amazon thing. And so I shared with them kind of things that I had learned and things that had worked for me. And then they said, that's fantastic. Can you just do it for me? Because they had other strengths and other things that they wanted to do. And that's how I kind of accidentally started an Amazon marketing agency 3 years ago. And then since then, we've grown quite a bit and really focused on our mission to help over 100 clients sell $10 million or more on Amazon in the next 3 years. And so that's what we're really focused on right now.
That's a very noble mission, man. And I can imagine that a lot of people benefit from you being so passionate about helping them to grow. I think that's an amazing treat to have in an agency, and it does kind of improve, the status of this agency work, because what I see a lot happening in this agency space is that there's a lot of people who just don't take this seriously. There's a lot of agencies who kind of do not deliver and who are not really, don't have this commitment like you expressed just now to really grow, to help our clients to grow. And I think that is kind of damaging for our reputation. But hearing you speak, I think you're doing the right thing. So you're actually improving the status of marketing agencies. And I really appreciate that. Yeah. That's a very cool thing you're doing there.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really proud of the work that we do. And really the entire team, we come at it from an owner's perspective, because we understand at the end of the day, we want to build brands to make money. So that's what we do through the agency. And then, we're working on a few other projects in addition to that in order to provide. I really love working with brand owners and sellers to come up with those strategies to implement. And so we're working on other resources to help even beyond that. So one thing that we've launched recently I've actually launched with two other gentlemen who are also great Amazon sellers and marketers in their own right, something called Brand Fortress HQ, where we've got resources, a lot of it for free, and then of course, some paid stuff as well. But there, like, we offer a free after purchase funnel blueprint course, because this is one of the things I think, 2023 and beyond, what I see is that, this is really where the money is going to be made in the next, 3 to 5 years, is in building a brand and using Amazon as that vehicle in order to do it. And just having that closer relationship with your customers is a big part of that. And then one of the other things that I do as well is that I volunteer as a mentor for a nonprofit called Bunker Labs here in the States that offers a ton of free resources and programs for military veterans who either want to build a business or want to grow their business. And so mostly what I work on are the folks that, they figured out how to make $1 off their business, and now they're trying to figure out how to make this a full-time occupation and be, full-time entrepreneurs. And I have an absolute fire for doing that as well.
Wow, that sounds so cool, man. You seem to have a very big heart to help others, even with your work off your agency work. So that's amazing. That is very good, man. And it makes me even more curious. How did this person, Jon Stojan, come about? What was his story? What was he like when he was 10 years old? Let us know about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go back a little bit further, because I think probably the biggest impact of my entrepreneurial journey was actually my parents. So my parents were entrepreneurs, but in a little bit different way. Maybe not as much as in a way that we normally think of it. So they actually started a farm in the late 70s. So they originally grew up outside of Chicago, Illinois, where there's probably some of the best farmland in the world. And they moved from there to western Minnesota, which is about 2,000 miles away, because land was a lot cheaper. There wasn't as many people, and they saw a big opportunity there. And that was kind of their entrepreneurial dream. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out for a number of different reasons, most of them outside of their control. So in the early 80s, that farm failed, and they actually, because of all the stress and everything like that, it drove them to a divorce when I was about 2 years old. So they split. And if I'm being completely honest, I think they left a lot of mental and emotional scars from that. So that was kind of my first introduction. And so I've always had always been interested in entrepreneurship, but also at the same time kind of had a fear of it just from that experience from a very young age. So I mean, my first kind of putting my toe in the water of entrepreneurship was actually baseball cards when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is amazing. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I heard the baseball card, the Pokemon stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I mean, it seems to be an American thing or something. But yeah, go ahead. So
Yeah,
you started trading baseball cards.
Yep. So I started trading baseball cards, and with my two brothers, and really for a couple of years, like we built up a pretty good collection. In fact, it's also another lesson I've learned. I've still held a few of those, kind of some of my favorites. I still have, almost at this point we're 30 some years later. So
Wow.
I still have like a Terry Bradshaw rookie card for football. I've got some other big players for baseball where I still have rookie cards and that type of stuff kind of tucked away in the attic. But I learned a lot from that about, being an entrepreneur. The value of something is really determined by, the value that somebody puts on it. So, there was kind of an equalizer with that. That time, I think it was like Topps or somebody like that had a magazine that kind of told you what they thought the price should be. But there was always some flexibility with that. And so, we were always working on, trading up or trading to our favorite players. But then also, I still remember, because I grew up, basically I grew up poor in a small town. I didn't have a whole lot of money to buy, the cool electronics that were coming online in like the late 80s and early 90s. And so I remember trading some baseball cards to one of my friends for a Game Boy. And that was just blew my mind that I could trade these cards that, in theory had value for something that definitely had a lot of value to the rest of the world and especially to me. And in fact, I still have that Game Boy. And my kids, who were middle school and high school, played with it earlier this year. And that was quite a shock to them of how far technology has come since then.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think that's a very important lesson to learn. So the value of things is determined not by us, but by the people, what are they willing to spend, right? So I think that's a lesson you learned very early in your life, trading cards. And of course, I mean, even today, I think there are these collector's items where you can only like scratch your head, like, why would people spend this amount of money on this kind of stuff, which in itself looks pretty, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, then again, if people are willing to spend, then that's the price. Yeah, that's how the market price is determined. So you had a very early experience trading cards. You were still a young boy at that time, and then what happened next? What was the next step in your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so growing up in a tiny little town in western Minnesota of 300 people with about two stop signs, no stop lights, there wasn't a ton of opportunity, for as an entrepreneur, and especially growing up poor, there's a lot of things. If anything that I wanted, if it was a car or clothes or anything else, even in at high school, I basically had to figure out how to make money for it. And the easiest way to do that was to go get a job. So I worked at Burger King. I worked at Walmart. I did roofing in the summer. I did concrete in the summer. I did a lot of different things, and I learned a ton from those jobs as well. I mean, I definitely learned, from roofing and concrete, how tough and physically demanding those jobs were, and seeing, some of the people that I was working with that were, two times or three times my age and still doing that job. And while I was very thankful for the job that I had at that time, I knew that that's not where I wanted to stop. Um, and then I also had a really interesting job where I was the one town over. They had a call center, so a telemarketing center where you'd call people, and they were selling credit cards, which was a huge financial education for me, because the two types of customers they sold to, and which ones you were talking to from kind of switched from one day to the other. One were people that were very much working class, that really didn't understand how credit and credit cards worked, and usually had gone through a bankruptcy or something like that. And so the card that they were getting was 20 or 30% interest rate, and all these other types of things. And then we also sold to people that were incredibly well-to-do, and so they got an interest rate that was like 3%. And had a lot more freedom as far as what was involved in the value provided. So it was just a really good education in kind of finance. And even to this day, I think I've paid less than $100 in my entire life in credit card interest, just because I've seen so many people fall into that trap and fall behind. And once you get in that hole, it's really tough to get out.
Oh yeah, that's another very relevant lesson learned. The credit card debt. So that was like the credit card stuff is something where you got involved also in trading credit cards. Is that correct?
No. So I was
No.
just working the phone. So I was a salesperson, which that
Oh.
was the other thing that was really helpful too, is that, I mean, we were smiling and dialing, probably 20 to 30 people an hour. So,
Oh.
it was helpful in the sense of you didn't take anything too personal. And you understood that, what you were offering was only, probably a right fit right now for 1% of those people. And that was completely fine. And at least one of my things that I always took away from it, because obviously, even at that time, that industry had a lot of a lot of shady practices, and it's even more
Oh.
shady today, is that, for myself, I said I was always going to be honest with people. And so, if they asked me a question, I was always upfront about what the interest rate was, what were, if
Hmm.
there's any fees involved and that type of stuff. And if that meant I lost a sale, that meant I lost a sale.
Hmm. Yeah. So you were an honest boy, and you had a very early experience in sales, which I believe is a crucial part of being an entrepreneur and running a business. I think when we start, we often think it's about what we do, and the product, the service, and so forth. But and then we move forward, and then we realize it's actually about how we can sell these things, and not about the things themselves. So the sales part, I think, is an essential part of being an entrepreneur, and you learn that very early on. So I think that could have had a very positive impact on your journey moving forward.
Yeah, well, it definitely gave me a lot of confidence because as a 16-year-old kid, I was one of the better salespeople that they had there, and it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't you know most of the people there again were double or triple my age, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it was because I well, one, I didn't desperately need the money, and I wasn't I was just very straightforward with people. I think that helped
Mm-hmm.
a lot,
Mm-hmm.
where a big part of sales is trust and communication.
Oh yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that experience really helped me, and it gave me a lot of confidence in my entrepreneurial journey and doing other things where I knew that I had at least an idea of what that sales looked like and how I wanted to sell.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Nice. And then what came next after that? So you were in this credit card business, and then that
Yeah.
was still during your school days, right?
Yep. So I went to school full time, and I worked almost full time for my almost my entire high school career. So not
Wow.
something I would recommend, but it it worked. And then
Mm-hmm.
my parents gave me some wonderful advice. They told me that I needed to go to college, but
Ah.
they didn't. Yeah. And then the but on that was, but we don't have any money to help you, and we don't have any advice on what you should do in college, just that you should go.
Mhm.
um so and
That's amazing advice. Just
yeah,
go.
well, God bless him in the sense of, I would say one of the best gifts that my mom ever gave me at that age was just telling me, hey, you can be anything that you want to be, you just have to work
Mm,
at it. And so for me, that really just kind of helped open the horizons growing up in a small little town, that like, hey, I can be anything I want to be,
mhm,
and just to go for it.
mhm,
So I had no idea, where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And I happened to bump into a random friend that was a friend of my high school girlfriend's dad. And one of the
mm,
things I was thinking about doing was going into the military in order to pay for college. And so
mm,
he had been in the Marines, and he had, gone in at right out of high school. And so what he told me, he said, well, if you're thinking about going to college, he said, first of all, if you want air conditioning, I recommend you join the Air Force. And if you're going to go into the military, it's a lot better to go in as an officer because you get paid a lot better, and you get a lot more freedom, to kind of do what you want to do. So I took that advice to heart, and I looked, and being the naive kid that I was, I applied to one school that was about 4 hours away, and that my first large lecture class was bigger than my entire town. And I picked a major in international studies that just sounded like fun. And then, I was just very curious and really wanted to dive into education. So I did a triple minor, which I would not recommend to anybody. Um,
mhm,
that I did in French, psychology, and aerospace studies. I learned a lot out of it, but later in life, and now my son's in high school. One of the things I tell him is that if you want to double major, that's fine, but nobody cares about the minors that you had in college. Um,
mhm,
so I got into the one school that I applied to that was a state school. And one of the big reasons why I wanted to go there was because they had a Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps program that was for college students. I walked in as a freshman and just was interested in the opportunity. And it happened that the first day that I put on my uniform in that program was September 11th, 2001.
Oh
So
my God.
that was quite a shocking experience, and definitely a day that I'll never remember or never forget.
Yeah, me
Um,
neither, man. Me neither.
so, and I mean, really shaped the next decade of my life. So, I, worked really hard there as basically for free. So I didn't get anything my freshman year for being a part of the program. But what I did is I worked hard enough and got recognized to where I ended up getting a 3-year full ride scholarship. So they paid for 3 out of 4 years of my bachelor's program.
Mhm.
Um, from there. And then I graduated, got married, and commissioned in the Air Force all in the same week, which is another thing that has worked out, but probably wouldn't recommend for most people.
Yeah, the American education system. I'm not really familiar, but I can relate to what you're saying. So I guess it's good to focus on fewer things, and which are the majors, right, in your
Yeah,
schooling
yeah.
system.
Well,
Yeah.
and people look for that piece, especially when you're young, in your early 20s, they're looking for that piece of paper that says, "Yep, I studied this,"
Hmm.
and put,
Hmm.
that was kind of my concentration. Nobody cares that,
Hmm.
you showed up to a handful of
Hmm.
classes and in some other subject,
Hmm.
which is something that I didn't understand at that time. And it's one of these things where those experiences are never wasted. They just maybe don't turn out in the way that
Yeah.
they think you will, that you think they will. Because I mean, I've met my wife in a psychology class, and then obviously as an entrepreneur, psychology is a huge part of what
Oh
we
yeah.
do on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So you're learning a lot from your wife, right?
Yes, well, especially now, she's actually she's an assistant teacher now, so I
Mm.
learn even more from her now.
But she's not involved in your business directly.
No,
She's
no, not
no.
directly. Nope.
Okay. All
Um,
right. All right.
so our business together is our family, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
our team is 100% remote, so that's one of the things that I really
Hmm.
enjoy now, and it's changed over time. Is that I primarily work from home
Hmm.
with a remote team, which allows me to do other things that I really treasure. Like this morning, my daughter, who's a middle schooler, still allows me to drop her off and hang out with her at the bus stop before she goes to school. So
Mm.
I really treasure that time that
Hmm.
we have together. And being an entrepreneur and having that freedom allows me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely one of the big benefits of being an entrepreneur is the freedom part. The safety part is not so dominant, but the freedom part is
Yeah.
also the one that actually made me choose that path. Yeah, because I prioritize freedom over safety. That's why I became an entrepreneur actually. So how did you get to sell on Amazon then? I mean, you finished college and what happened then?
Yeah, I took a very unusual route. So I joined active duty for the Air Force in 2005. And then I spent a year in Texas doing a 6-month training program. And I kind of laugh because the program's only 6 months, but in that time, I did a language immersion program in North Africa. And so for me, that was really eye opening. I was supposed to be studying French there. Really, I learned way more about the culture, very little about French because they kind of, where I was at, kind of combined French and Arabic, which is fine,
Oh.
but not the same as trying to learn how to be fluent in French.
Mhm.
And it was also really interesting because just the way the program, well, there wasn't a whole lot of structure for the program outside of the classroom. So you had 4 hours of pretty intensive language training. But then on the weekends, our only rule was don't get hurt and don't leave the country. So outside of that, we could go anywhere we wanted. So we pretty much traveled and did everything that anybody would ever want to do in North Africa, and just had a blast doing it.
Which
And I
part of North
learned.
Africa were you? Which one?
So I was in Tunisia.
Tunisia.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
just like Sarah is from Tunisia. Yeah.
Yeah.
I yeah, okay. Tunisia. I never been.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a that's a long way, yeah, from the US to end up in Tunisia. That must have been quite a culture shock for you.
Yeah. And I enjoyed every minute of it.
Ah,
I mean, there was a group of us of probably about, 10 to 15 of us. So, I mean, there was other, other people around that were just like me and spoke my language and that type of stuff. But, we'd really go out in small groups, especially over the weekends, and really take in everything that, the country wanted to give us. And,
hmm.
Tunisia's got some beautiful, beautiful beaches. They've got, uh, the desert there. I know, I mean, I know a lot of people don't think about the desert as being a beautiful place, but
Hmm.
they've got a number of key scenes from Star Wars that were filmed there. Tantouine is actually a
Oh,
town in Tunisia.
hmm.
So for the Star Wars fans out there, Tunisia is a special place. And just learning, outside of, um, especially when I was that young, outside of, how things, the rest of the world kind of works and views the United States and views kind of the interaction between other countries. Yeah, it was very eye opening.
Hmm. And so, how much time did you spend in Tunisia?
So I was there for almost 2 months.
Hmm. Okay,
Um,
and then you came back to the United States.
Yep. So then I came back to the United States and got my first assignment to South Carolina. I spent very little time there because I was about 2 months after I got there. I was deployed to the Middle East, which
Mm.
was a hilarious experience because I ended up being so there was three junior officers that were all of us were deployed together to be a part of this mission planning team. And at 2 months on the job, I was the most senior of them. So
Mm.
um, none of us had any idea what we were doing. And my boss basically came in the first day who hadn't met us before. And I had gone a couple of days ahead of time of everybody else that was on my team. And so he was like, "Hey, who's coming?" And he was expecting, some seasoned folks along with me as, um, the kind of, really green young officer, that there was going to be these seasoned folks that kind of trained him along. And when I was like, "Hey, it's going to be us three brand new people," he literally said out loud, "Oh shit." So that was my first day deployed in the Middle East. And what we were doing is working with a cargo unit where we were flying supplies into Iraq, Afghanistan, all kinds of other places. And there was a lot going on at that time because there was the surge into Iraq. And then we were doing other interesting things where we were airdropping, bulldozers to build up berms for forward operating
Oh,
bases and all kinds of things. That was super interesting. And so, we worked with all kinds of different countries. I distinctly remember one country where we dropped them a bulldozer directly on their camp because they didn't want, or they got shot at every time they went outside of their camp. So that was a really interesting planning process and experience to see. And then, being somebody who was, I was probably 23, 24 at that time. I ended up briefing the general who was in charge of all the air forces in the Middle East on some of the airdrop operations that we were doing because he came to us for something that we were working on and we were kind of uniquely capable of doing that mission. So, I mean, it was quite an experience. It's one of the things that I look at and say, there's no way any other 23-year-old, or very rare that a 23-year-old has that unique of an experience to sink or
mm,
swim at that age. So
mm,
I'm just, very thankful for that.
mm,
And did a couple more deployments there. And then from there, basically got told that my next assignment was going to be out of basically away from home about 9 months or more out of the year. And my son had just been born at that time. And both my wife and I were like, absolutely not. Not a good fit for us. So I had a commander who had convinced me that I needed to, so there's active duty military in the US, and then there's Guard and Reserve, which is like 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year type of thing. He's like, I understand this full time thing isn't for you, but we think you do really good work. Just try this part time thing.
Mhm.
And it happened to be, we moved back to where we're from in the upper Midwest. There was a unit nearby, went in and talked to them, and they're like, yep, we'd love to have you. And so that ended up turning into, I was testing out some entrepreneurial ideas, but not really having a whole lot of traction with it in the few months after I got off of active duty. And then I just happened to be in the right place at the right time where they offered me a 6-figure job to work there full time. And, it was 40 hours a week. And so it allowed my wife to stay at home with our kids, which was, really important to us when they were young. So I actually did that for 10 years and learned a ton from that, where learned how
10
to,
years. You were
yeah,
working for 40 hours a day?
no,
Oh,
40 hours a week, like it's a government job. So, a lot of time
okay.
off, a lot of different things where you have a lot of flexibility. In my
Hmm.
opinion, fairly easy. But I mean, I got to do a lot of things while I was there too, in the sense of I had to recruit and rebuild the team that was there of 12 to 14 people that we had that I was in charge of. I hired my first person ever. And then about 2 weeks later, he got arrested 3 times in one day. So that was my first hiring experience, and that was very educational. Um, and I built up that team to really be, the best in the Air Force Reserve at what we did, which our specialty was mission planning for cargo units. And then we
Hmm.
deployed to the Middle East a few more times, and then did exercises in Central Africa and Europe, and did all kinds of stuff in between. And it really wasn't until the last couple of years that I finally had the capacity. I was kind of trying some different business ideas to where I finally, about uh, 2017, where I started to get some traction in a food business where we did a Kickstarter, raised about $10,000 for that. And then in 2018, launched on Amazon. And again, this was a nights and weekends project, and built that into a 6-figure brand.
Hmm. And that was as a sidekick. So you were still working your full-time job and on weekends, and at
Yeah.
night you were building your food business. I mean, how did you come across with this idea to do this very particular thing? I mean, what kind of food was it you were selling?
Yeah, so I got very involved in the health space, and so really dove down um, into kind of healthy fats and keto and that type of stuff, which was just coming up at the time. And we happen to have in the area that I live in near Minneapolis, St. Paul, we have some very large food businesses. We have Cargill, we have General Mills, we have a few other companies that are, known throughout the world for the products that they have. Well, because of that, there's a very um, high quality and a lot of talent here for food science and packaging and a lot of things that you would want to have in order to start a food business. And
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of an idea of what I wanted to do based on just ordering products from online and then also from the store shelf. And I brought them into a food scientist who worked with the local university. And I said, hey, I want to turn this into a product. And what I originally brought him, he said, in order to start this, it's going to be about $300,000 to do your first run.
Oh.
And I didn't have $300,000. And even if I did, I probably wasn't going to invest it on my first run. So we came up with a way to kind of adapt that product from being requiring very specialized manufacturing and that type of stuff that was very hard to secure at the time into something that was shelf stable, that was very easy to fill, that
Mm-hmm.
was very easy to manufacture. um,
Mm-hmm.
and then we took that process and essentially turned it into a product,
Mm-hmm.
and then tested it out on Kickstarter to see kind of friends and family. And then again, it was very much focused around the keto space. So I went to, at that time there was a big keto conference that had just started up. So I reached out to the people that had started that and I had coordinated with them, and so they helped me kind of get the word out, and that's how we ended up, like I said, raising $10,000 on a Kickstarter in I think 2 or 3 weeks, where we said, hey, there's probably something here.
Hmm. Okay. And after raising this Kickstarter campaign and being rather successful with it, you decided to move forward and started listing this thing on Amazon. Was that your first marketplace?
So actually, we started on Shopify. I knew I wanted to do
Ah,
e-commerce because, again, wholesale can be a great route of, like this product fit pretty well with like small grocery stores and cooperatives and that type of stuff. But it's a lot of knocking on doors, and it's a
mhm.
lot of
Oh, yeah.
follow-up calls and that type of stuff. And I knew that my job kept me occupied from 9 to 5 every day, so I didn't really my time window didn't really fit that. And it was hard, it was going to be hard for me to scale with that. So I started out with, I set up a Shopify store, and, we were probably doing $1,000 a month on Shopify. But it was, and I think anybody who started a store on Shopify can probably relate to this. It's hard and expensive, even, back then, in order to drive traffic.
Oh, yeah.
So, I looked around and somebody was like, hey, you should try this Amazon thing. So it kind of took me a couple of months in order to get our first listing up. And, the first month, we had a couple $1,000s in sales on Amazon with, quite frankly, an okay listing. It was a good product, but, our listing
Mhm.
wasn't great. We weren't running any ads. There's a lot of things that, would get optimized over time. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
that quickly scaled into a six-figure brand.
Quickly scaled into a six-figure brand. How did that happen? How suddenly your like mediocre listing became a six-figure brand? What was the process to get there?
Yeah, that's
Was
a
it
great.
was it about?
So I think a couple of things helped us. One is we had a very specific niche. So um, we we focused on something that was targeted towards a very defined audience. So, for example, our product was specifically for people that were into kind of this idea of healthy fats and keto. And so, if you were into that, you were going to find us very quickly. And we were the only option, because what was unique about our
What?
product was that it was in, we had like we did coffee that was in like travel packets and had like the healthy fats in it, and then we did K cups. And so like we very much differentiated ourselves from kind of the generic products that were on the market, that quite frankly those were also doing very well. But having that really tight niche, I think, helped us early on, even with the bad listing. Because I mean, it, 5, 6 years later, Amazon's obviously a lot different, where everybody's up their game pretty considerably. But at that time, we were almost the only game in town for what we sold. And so even though we
Hmm.
didn't have an amazing listing, because we had, a good product with customers that had a burning need, that we solved that problem for them, we were able to gain traction quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and of course, to be the only one selling a particular product is a huge advantage, and you can get away with a lot of stuff if you're the only guy selling this thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that
but
only
as soon
lasted
as
about 6 months, and then we really had to up our game, which is,
Mhm.
that's part of the game on Amazon, and quite frankly, I think any other space. Even if you're selling off
Yeah.
your own Shopify store, or on the, you're in the retail space on the shelf. You might be the only product for a little while, but eventually there's going to be competition, and you have to figure out how to work with that. And it's not always a bad thing. I mean, the other thing that we saw is that, yes, there was more competition in our space, but there was also, because of that, a lot. We saw the traffic grow pretty considerably from the
Mhm.
search terms and that type of stuff that we were targeting.
Yeah, yeah. The other side of the story is that people say when nobody's selling this kind of product, then maybe there's no demand for it, so maybe you should just stay away. So, finding
Right.
this unique thing that nobody's selling is not always a good idea, but in your case, it worked out. So, yeah, I think you're on the right track with this. And of course, the keto niche is something that has gained a lot of attention over the past few years, right?
Yeah. Well, now it's incredibly competitive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much different now than when
Mm-hmm.
we started 5 years
Yeah.
ago.
Mm. And then from gaining this Amazon experience, your friends started to take notice what you do, and then they started to ask for your advice, and that's how your agency, First North Marketing, came about. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Mm.
And it
Oh
was
yeah,
really,
wow.
from the pandemic, they were all wholesale. So they were selling into, these grocery cooperatives and that type of stuff. And when the pandemic hit, all those stores basically stopped ordering. So their sales
Mm.
dropped 90% overnight. They still had inventory and all these other things that they needed to move. They had dabbled in Amazon, and they had set up, maybe they started an account. And what I saw a lot of was, they put like their brand name and like the first keyword of what their product was about, but nothing else. And they only had a main image. And then they would do, fulfilled by merchants. Well,
Mm.
even at that time, it meant that if you had a couple of competitors, um, you were going to have a really hard time, getting sales compared to a competitor that had, a lot better optimization and was fulfilled by Amazon. And
Mm.
so, just making some, what now are some pretty basic changes really helped. And then advertising was just, starting to come into, really being an important part on Amazon, and getting them at least the foundation of
Mhm.
Amazon ads
Mhm.
really helped them go from essentially 0 sales a day to something that was meaningful for their business.
Mhm. Cool. So I'm assuming you're not doing your 9 to 5 job anymore at this time, right?
No, no. I stopped that in 2019. So I've been a full time
Oh.
entrepreneur for almost over 4 years now.
Hmm. Cool.
Um, and I'm very proud of the work that I did there. And in fact, I still do serve in the reserves as a traditional reservist, which means I do 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, in that same office. But now I work in more of an advisory capacity. So
Hmm.
when I come in for my 1 weekend, it's most of the folks are people that I brought on board, that I trained. And so they do a fantastic job making sure that everything gets taken care of through the rest of the month. And so I come in for my 1 weekends and I just ask, how did this go? Hey, we maybe need to tweak this. And can you guys work on this, over the next month?
Hmm.
And then, we kind of high five, and and then I'm gone. So
Hmm.
I think, most of the vast majority of the people there have stayed for a lot longer than on average, so they enjoy being there. But I'm sure they
Hmm.
roll their eyes a little bit when I come in and ask questions and say, "Hey, I really need you guys to do this. And by the way, I'll see you next month. I hope it goes well." Um, so I mean, it's still a lot of fun, and I think for me, it's really taught me a lot about how to move out of the driver's seat, which is kind of where my comfort zone was before, and really giving me some practical experience of how to move into more of the navigator seat and being that
Hmm.
advisor, and rather than doing
Hmm.
everything for them and holding onto the steering wheel to
Hmm.
drive the car, where now I'm just saying, kind of pointing in directions and then coming back to check in a while later, and seeing how effective that was. And
Hmm.
I've gotten a lot better at, effective leadership and communication because of that. And
Hmm.
I'm always surprised by the amount of things that I feel are clear are not
Hmm.
always, as crystal clear as I think they are. And,
Hmm.
problems that I could have never anticipated that come up in order to, actually execute on something.
Hmm. Cool. So you're still kind of involved in your past employee career to some extent, but you're actually 99% focused on growing your agency, and
Yeah.
you're also still selling on Amazon, is it?
So no, we're not selling anymore, or at least not right now. So we ran into an issue where Amazon kind of changed their requirements for the product that we had, and we used to be in the food category, and then they decided that we needed to be a supplement, even though the FDA disagrees with them. And so we started looking at lawyer fees and all that type of stuff. It didn't make sense in order to
Mm-hmm.
try to fight Amazon on it. So unfortunately, we did have to shut that brand down on Amazon. So we're kind of in between
Wow.
brands right now. I do have a couple of things that are kind of bubbling that I'm really itching to get back into the game as a seller. But I'm also
Mm-hmm.
learning that I really enjoy the clients that we work with, and I get a lot of that out of working with them, where I get to focus on the strategy and the marketing piece of it, which
Mm-hmm.
is quite frankly the part of the business that I really loved anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them really enjoy the product development and inventory and kind of the other pieces of what it takes to run a successful brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, I'm pretty happy with working with me doing what I feel like I really enjoy and what I'm really good at, and letting my clients do what they really enjoy and what they're good at.
Fantastic. Wow, that sounds very accomplished and very successful. And that brings me to the question which I always ask my guests towards the end of our podcast. Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who is looking to start his entrepreneurial journey today? Or for that matter, what kind of advice would you have given 10-year-old John with all the wisdom that you have collected as of today?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is just to correct the record a little bit is that I know what we've talked about is pretty much the highlight reel. There's definitely some bumps in that road, and there's been a few a website denying company and a SaaS company and other things that I tried along the way that didn't work out. So not everything has been a home run or even a base hit, and I think that's part of being an entrepreneur. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as the advice, the two things that come to my mind, the first one is, especially as someone who spends a lot of time on Amazon today, is know the game that you're playing. And what I mean by that is that I still think Amazon is an amazing vehicle in order to scale your brand. Um, but you have to know how to work with the system when it comes to things like sales velocity and and getting traction on the platform and that type of stuff, and understand what that game looks like and where in that process you are, and know how it changes. We kind of flash back a little bit to Amazon and 2017, 2018, 2019, where especially early on, it was really, the game was, hey, let me find a good product on Alibaba, and maybe I'll modify it a little bit, and then I'll put it on Amazon with an okay listing, and I can make some good money from that. And then it transitioned to, kind of the same thing, but now I need to have, a little bit of an ad strategy around that. And then today, I feel like it's really transitioned into, you have to have a strong brand, and really, for long-term success, you have to be building a brand that both on and off Amazon in order to be successful over the long term. So understanding, knowing the game that you're playing, and being willing to play that game. And I think that really comes down to setting the correct expectations accordingly. I think about entrepreneurs in kind of two different groups. One of them is the Edisons, where they're going through iteration, and it might take 2 years and a few thousand different kind of tweaks and changes to finally make that light bulb work. And then, there's a small percentage out there that are the Zuckerbergs, where they just have this, brilliant idea, and their timing and everything else is right. And, they wake up a short time later with $1 billion business. I
Mm-hmm.
think that most people probably fall into that Edison bucket. That's where I fall. And so having
Mm-hmm.
that expectation up front, I don't feel like I need to have $1 billion home run in the first year or I'm a failure. I know that there's going to be work in that process, and I'm very open to being lucky. But at the same time, I don't expect it either. I expect that it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be work, and to really enjoy that work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then thinking about it like, the other analogy that I would use is, they talk about business like poker. For me, it's like blackjack in the sense of, I'm not complicated enough for to be good at poker, but I'm okay at blackjack, where I understand, okay, if this is what the dealer has and this is what I have, I'm willing to bet a little bit. And based on those cards, I know if I've got a good chance or not a good chance for success. And once I see something that's working, I'm going to double down on that. And I think that's, really the difference in the mentality between an entrepreneur and when you have a 9-to-5 job that I've experienced, which is, as an entrepreneur, probably 4 out of the 5 things that you try aren't going to work. But that one thing that does work, you can double down on it and really, gain some significant traction. And I think that's important. So I would say that's the, probably knowing the game that you're playing and kind of the right expectations around it is the biggest thing. And then the last thing that I would leave with also is, be authentic. So we're living in a time where, AI has really changed how we all communicate and that type of stuff. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, where I, post a lot and I engage with a lot of folks, because I enjoy the conversation within the Amazon community, and I learn, a lot from the people that I interact with, and I hope that the people that follow me learn a lot as well. But I see, for just as an example, where there's a lot of AI bots where people, I'm sure that you've seen them too, where they'll leave a comment that is generated by an AI tool, and it just adds noise and it doesn't add any value. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just encourage people in this day and age. I think the most important thing that you can be is, be authentic with yourself, be authentic with your friends and partners, and be authentic with your customers.
Oh yeah, authenticity. I love that one. I think that's an amazing statement as a closing statement for us to meditate on. Be authentic. I love that. Yeah, John. For everyone who would like to get in touch with you, we'll leave a link in the description. It's probably your website link or anything else you would like to share for people to get in touch.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, our website, if you're looking for help with, Amazon services, I think we've got, some really great programs. And then, I would encourage you, come over to, LinkedIn and say hi. I post a
Mm,
lot of content there, and engage with a lot of people that I think really are on the front edge of what's happening on Amazon. And there's a lot happening.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so that's a great place. I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who wants to reach out there,
mhm.
and would encourage them to go over there just
Cool.
to see what's happening in the Amazon space and to stay up to speed.
Are you in a specific group or is it just your profile?
Um, so I have about 10 people that I follow that I think do a fantastic job in the Amazon space. And then, of course,
Hmm.
I post as well. So
Hmm.
um, that's generally what I probably spend 90% of my time on LinkedIn.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Cool. Yes. So we shall also include your LinkedIn profile. That's very good. Thank you so much, Mr. John, for sharing your story and your wisdom on this podcast. And I also appreciate, of course, our viewers and listeners who are with us until now. We are like 52 minutes in, so it's been an extensive episode, but I think it was really worthwhile hearing your story, hearing your insights, Mr. John. So thank you so much for being with us, and we shall stay in touch.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.